Hi everyone. So in this lecture, we're going to focus on cognitive development and aging in late adulthood. So as we get older, the brain gradually changes in both structure and function. And these changes are a normal part of aging. There's person-to-person differences, so the rate and extent to which the brain ages depends on every individual. But more broadly speaking, the aging brain experience shifts in brain volume, neural communication, and the way that it compensates for those changes. So one of the main changes that occurs is there is a slow decline in brain volume. So as the neurons age, their dendrites, which are those branch-like extensions that help them communicate, they begin to shrink, and the number of synapses and glial cells decreases. Glial cells normally support and protect neurons. They tend to provide less assistance, and a lot of the neural fibers start to lose their myelin coat or their myelin sheath. So this slows down communication between neurons. Researchers describe this pattern as last in, first out hypothesis, meaning that the areas of the brain that are the last to fully develop are the first to show decline. The prefrontal cortex, which matures in early adulthood, that tends to show changes earlier. Sensory and motor areas, which are responsible for vision, hearing, and movement, those are among the last to be affected since they develop early in life. So although these structural changes occur, they happen gradually. So on average, brain volume decreases by less than half of 1% per year. And long-term studies show that these changes are slow and they're steady rather than sudden. And more importantly, small reductions in brain size do not necessarily mean that a person's intelligence or thinking skills decline. So overall, the brain maintains plasticity throughout late adulthood. So even when structural changes are going on, the brain is pretty resilient and capable of adapting to these changes. So this ability to reorganize and adjust to age-related change is called neurocompensation. So we have this neurocompensation that we are able to adapt to age-related brain changes. And in fact, older adults show increased brain activity and may use additional or different brain regions when they're solving problems. We also tend to have cognitive reserve, which is the brain's ability to make flexible and efficient use of its resources. So people that have built cognitive reserve over their lifetime tend to cope better with brain aging. So experiences like having higher education, having a complex work role, or having mentally stimulating tasks or hobbies, they all strengthen cognitive reserve. Bilingualism is another example. So people that regularly use two languages, they tend to have better mental flexibility. They tend to have improved attention control, and they have stronger white matter connections in the brain. Another exciting finding is in neuroscience is neurogenesis, and this is the creation of new neurons. This continues throughout life, particularly in the hippocampus, which is important for memory. And so this process of course, happens more slowly in adulthood. Experiences that involve learning or physical activity are slower, but they're still helping new neurons survive and integrate into the brain network. It's estimated about 2% of neurons are renewed each year, and this supports lifelong plasticity, learning, and emotional well-being. So physical health and health behavior predict brain health. So how active you are, whether you stay away from drugs and alcohol, that can also play a role in the aging brain. Physical health and brain health are very connected. So lifestyle factors like having obesity, high blood pressure, smoking, and inactivity can absolutely accelerate brain aging. Having healthy behaviors like a balanced diet, adequate vitamins, nutrients, and getting regular physical activity help preserve brain structure and function. So, older adults that are physically active tend to show greater brain volume and more efficient brain activity, especially in areas important for memory and abstract thinking. Exercise, like aerobic activity like walking, swimming, cycling, has been shown to improve brain connectivity, increase blood flow, and reduce the risk of cognitive decline. And these benefits are linked not only to better heart health, but also to direct improvements in brain tissue. Older adults that begin a moderate exercise program later in life, they tend to show growth in hippocampus volume and better memory performance over time. And so this demonstrates that the adult brain remains plastic and capable of improvement throughout the lifespan. So now we're going to briefly cover dementia and what dementia is. Dementia is a neurocognitive disorder, and it's a general term that describes the progressive loss of mental abilities caused by changes in the brain that affect higher level thinking skills. So, a neurocognitive disorder is the broader label, and it's used to describe a group of diseases that lead to the gradual deterioration of brain function. And these disorders can vary in cause and severity, and it is possible for an individual to experience more than one type of dementia at the same time. There are significant geographic differences in dementia rates around the world. And so there are many differences in access to education, healthcare, and nutrition that can impact the rates of dementia. Currently, about 50 million people worldwide are living with dementia, and that number is expected to increase to over 150 million by 2050. Much of this growth will occur in low and middle income countries. So, right now, around 60% of people with dementia live in developing regions, and by 2050, that percentage is projected to rise to more than 70%. The most rapid growth in the older adult population, therefore, in dementia cases, is taking place in China, India, and other South Asian and Western Pacific countries. Limited access to education, like I said earlier, healthcare, inadequate nutrition, they all contribute to differences in dementia rates. So, someone with limited access to education, healthcare, and does not have adequate nutrition is bound to have a higher rate or higher increased risk of dementia compared to somebody that eats healthy, has access to education, and plenty of healthcare resources. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, and it's a progressive neurodegenerative disorder. It typically begins with having mild memory problems, and then it gradually advances to more severe cognitive declines. Typically, in the severe range, Alzheimer's disease is affecting people's personality, behavior, and motor function. It eventually leads to severe dementia and death. There are two main biological features that are associated with Alzheimer's. The first is amyloid plaques, which are large clumps formed when beta amyloid proteins accumulate. Um, they accumulate along with dead neurons and glial cells, and eventually they spread. The second is neurofibrillary tangles, and these are twisted bundles of fibers made of a protein called tau, and it develops when neurons begin to break down and collapse. The diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is often a process of exclusion. So, meaning that doctors rule out other possible causes of memory loss and cognitive decline before they confirm Alzheimer's disease. So, current research is focused on identifying the biomarkers that can help detect the disease earlier and more accurately. In the early stages, the main symptom is memory loss, particularly difficulty with remembering recent events or new information. As the disease gets worse and the amyloid plaques start to spread and take over other areas of the brain, it leads to broader cognitive impairments that affect concentration, reasoning, and overall memory function. Many individuals, around 50% of them, experience depression during the course of the illness. And then eventually, Alzheimer's causes individuals to lose the ability to care for themselves and perform daily activities independently. Alzheimer's disease often runs in families, and it has several genetic risk factors that increase susceptibility. There are environmental and lifestyle factors that also play a role. Engaging in lifelong learning and mentally stimulating activities can help build cognitive reserve because it strengthens the connections among neurons. So, this reserve acts as a protective factor that may slow the effects of brain atrophy and delay the onset or progression of Alzheimer's symptoms. Vascular dementia is the second most common type of dementia around the world, and it happens when blood flow to parts of the brain is blocked, and it's often due to strokes or damage to blood vessels. So, recognizing the early warning signs of a stroke is critical. Unlike Alzheimer's disease, which usually causes like a slow and steady decline in memory and thinking, vascular dementia is often more sudden and it causes sudden drops in mental ability. Typically, mental ability drops after each stroke happens, and these changes may seem mild at first, and sometimes people do improve for a short time because the brain can adapt. However, the more strokes that occur, the more brain tissue gets lost, and then the brain over time struggles to compensate for more damages. As vascular dementia progresses, the symptoms can look very similar to Alzheimer's. People get confused, they have trouble with memory, and they have a lot of trouble thinking clearly. The cause and brain changes are different. So in vascular dementia, the brain damage from strokes can be seen on MRI scans, and it could show specific areas that were affected. But in Alzheimer's disease, which is marked by plaques and tangles, they're not typically seen in vascular dementia. Vascular dementia involves deterioration in white matter and damage that's more localized to certain regions. Both genetic and lifestyle factors influence the risk of developing vascular dementia. So, obesity, diabetes, having high blood pressure, and heart disease increase the risk because they damage blood vessels and they make strokes more likely to happen. Healthy habits like getting regular physical activity and managing blood pressure and keeping the heart healthy can help prevent or slow down vascular dementia. Lewy body dementia is about as common as vascular dementia. So, Lewy body dementia is the second most common type of dementia after Alzheimer's disease. One of the biggest challenges in diagnosing it is that the symptoms are very similar to Alzheimer's. So, like Alzheimer's, people with Lewy body dementia experience a gradual decline in their thinking and memory that interferes with their work and social life. They may also have trouble with attention, visual spatial skills, and executive functions like planning and decision making. However, Lewy body dementia has some unique features that help distinguish it from Alzheimer's. And a key function of Lewy body dementia is fluctuating cognition, which means a person's alertness and thinking may improve and worsen unpredictably. People may also experience visual hallucinations, motor symptoms similar to Parkinson's disease, and sleep disturbances such as acting out dreams or sleepwalking. The disease gets its name from Lewy bodies, and these are tiny round clumps of abnormal protein that build up inside brain cells and cause them to die. These same protein deposits are also found in the brains of people with Parkinson's. So these suggest that the two disorders are biologically related and share some genetic risk factors. Unfortunately, Lewy bodies usually can't be seen on brain scans until very late in the disease or after death. Like other dementias, Lewy body dementia is diagnosed by ruling out other causes since there is no single test to confirm it. Researchers are still searching for biomarkers that can help identify the disease early on, but the research is still in its early stages. There's no cure, but medications can help manage the symptoms like the sleep problems, hallucinations, and difficulties. Over time, Lewy body dementia is a progressive neurodegenerative disease which means that the symptoms will worsen gradually and eventually lead to death. So there are racial, ethnic, and gender differences in dementia rates. So women are at a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease than men. In the US, African Americans are about twice as likely, and Hispanic adults are about 1.5 times more likely to be diagnosed with dementia compared to white adults. And so these differences are influenced by social and environmental factors. Socioeconomic status, which includes education, income, and access to healthcare, these play an important role in explaining some of the disparities in dementia rates. Having lower opportunities to education, being in poverty can reduce access to resources that would build a better cognitive reserve. So people that have a better cognitive reserve have more brain resilience, or their brain is more resilient to aging and disease. Those that have lower educational opportunities have less of a chance to build a cognitive reserve, which makes the brain less resilient to aging. There are some cultural factors too that can matter. So beliefs about aging, trust in the medical system, these can affect whether people seek help or receive an early diagnosis. Because of a long history of discrimination and mistreatment, there are members of marginalized communities that may be distrustful of healthcare providers. And so this can lead to delayed healthcare and fewer opportunities for prevention or treatment. Some neurocognitive disorders begin by damaging subcortical areas of the brain. So, subcortical areas are deeper regions that help control our movement. When this happens, people gradually lose motor control and it leads to movement difficulties. Parkinson's disease is a neurocognitive disorder where neurons in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra stop working or die. And this part of the brain produces dopamine, which is a chemical that helps control our movement. As the dopamine levels drop, people experience slowness of movement and they start to experience movement issues. The symptoms are typically muscle stiffness, tremors, and problems with balance. The progression of Parkinson's can vary depending on the person. So people that have a larger cognitive reserve, meaning their brains can use resources more flexibly, they often experience slower decline in function. The disease is influenced by both genetic and environmental factors. Being exposed to certain toxins can increase the risk of Parkinson's. Having a head injury also increases the risk of Parkinson's. Diagnosing it is challenging because there is no single test that can confirm Parkinson's. So doctors rely on medical history, symptoms, and physical exams. It's not curable, but there are treatments that can help manage the symptoms. So one approach is called deep brain stimulation, and that involves using electrical impulses in specific brain areas to improve movement and reduce the tremors. So now we're going to cover some cognitive changes in older adulthood, primarily in attention and working memory. So as people age, changes in the senses, like our vision or hearing loss, are often linked to declines in thinking and our memory. When our sensory information is harder to process, it can make learning and remembering new things more difficult. So in terms of attention, older adults may find it harder to pay attention and focus on several things at once. So this would be more difficulty of dividing attention. They are having more difficulty multitasking. It becomes more challenging to focus on one task while ignoring distractions in the room. So this would be more difficulty of selective attention. Working memory allows us to hold and use information for short periods of time. So when we're remembering a phone number or following directions, this can become more challenging in older adulthood. Healthy older adults can still manage and control what they keep in working memory once that information is stored, but they may just need more effort or time to do it. One specific challenge that older adults face is called proactive interference. And this happens when older memories make it harder to learn or remember new information. So, for example, remembering an old password can interfere with learning a new password. Older adults may find it harder to stay engaged with academic style or classroom tasks, which are less familiar to their everyday experiences. So, memory declines can be observed not only in lab tests, but also in real life situations. So, they may find it difficult to remember appointments or where they place an object or item. In addition, chronic stress can make working memory less effective. So this can further reduce a person's ability to focus and recall information. So emotions can influence memory. Being in a positive mood often helps improve working memory and makes it easier to focus and remember information. As people age, they tend to show the positivity effect, which is called it's called a positivity effect, meaning there's a shift in attention from negative information towards more positive experiences or emotions. So, in other words, older adults are more likely to focus on uplifting or pleasant things rather than on negative things. And this is what's called the positivity effect, which can actually improve working memory. In terms of long-term memory, there are different types of long-term memory changes in different ways with age. Episodic memory typically tends to decline with age. Episodic memory involves remembering personal experiences and very specific life events. So, like what you did on your last birthday or your wedding, this tends to decline. Semantic memory is memory for facts and general knowledge. This usually stays stable over time. This does not really decline over time. Older adults also experience what's known as the reminiscence bump. And this means that they're more likely to recall memories from their youth and early adulthood than from other life stages. So they're more likely to remember things between the ages of 10 and 30 years. Both older adults and younger adults differ in the kinds of information they pay attention to and remember. So there are also generational differences in cognitive performance. And this reflects differences in education, the lifestyle, and the life experiences across age groups. So, language comprehension is the ability to understand spoken and written words. There is no change in language comprehension. So it generally stays the same and it can actually even improve with age. Older adults often maintain a strong vocabulary and understanding of word meanings. And this is an example of crystallized intelligence, which continues to grow throughout life. There are some changes in hearing and processing speed. So, for example, hearing loss can make it difficult to catch words, especially in noisy environments, and it can make understanding conversations harder. Older adults may miss parts of conversations or need extra effort to follow along. They often compensate for this by using context clues and life experiences to fill in what they did not hear. So, for instance, after years of watching the same TV show, a person can easily follow the plot even without catching every word. When it comes to speaking, many older adults notice that it takes them longer to retrieve specific words. So, they may pause more often or use general terms like thing instead of exact words. So, a common example is the tip of the tongue phenomenon when you know the word but you can't call it right away. These word finding difficulties are linked to slower processing and working memory changes. Although this can make communication feel more effortful, most older adults adjust by speaking more slowly, simplifying sentences, and using context to make their message clear. Cognitive changes in older adulthood also affect problem solving skills. So, in laboratory studies that use hypothetical problems, older adults tend to perform worse than younger adults. However, when problems are relevant to life experience or real life experience, older adults are often just as effective at making decisions. So, for example, they tend to be better at solving health related problems, such as deciding when to seek medical care, because they're drawing on past experience. In everyday life, older adults are typically efficient and practical decision makers. Especially if they are revisiting the same problem or facing the same problem often, they're typically efficient at making everyday decisions. And they may take longer to process information, but they can still reach high quality solutions. Experience is what helps them match strategies to goals more effectively than younger adults. So they rely on their crystallized intelligence and knowledge rather than their fluid intelligence, which refers to speed and reasoning. Older adults also tend to seek input from other people, like their spouses, children, or friends, when they're making important decisions. There's also a development of wisdom. So, wisdom refers to having a deep understanding of life and the ability to apply that understanding with insight, empathy, and balance. It involves having emotional maturity and being able to take perspectives, multiple people's perspectives, and having awareness that many life problems don't have perfect solutions. So there are many cultures that associate wisdom with age. Research does show that wisdom varies widely among individuals. So it tends to develop through experience, education, and engagement with others rather than simply aging. Studies show that adults of all ages can demonstrate wisdom, but older adults with rich life experience are more likely to show it. Wisdom is most visible when people deal with personal or emotionally meaningful problems. So, for example, both younger and older adults can show wise reasoning, but they do so more often in situations relevant to their own life stage. And so, this means that wisdom is not guaranteed with age, it just depends on experience, reflection, and opportunities to learn from life challenges. So, for most people, cognitive abilities stay fairly stable throughout adulthood. Several factors, though, can influence how the brain changes with age. So, education is one of the strongest predictors of how well people maintain their thinking and memory skills later in life. People with more years of schooling or continued learning opportunities tend to perform better on cognitive tasks as they age. Physical health also plays a major role. So, having good overall health supports strong cognitive functioning. Chronic illnesses or poor health habits can increase the risk of decline. And cognitive training and mental exercises can help slow down or even reverse certain age related declines. Older adults can show similar levels of improvement as similar to younger adults when they engage in structured learning and problem solving activities. So, encouraging older adults to stay mentally active is going to help them maintain and strengthen their cognitive abilities well into later on in life. So that whether that be taking on new challenges, learning new skills, or seeking new experiences, all of these can help improve cognitive development in adulthood.